Every time NASA goes to low Earth orbit, they say that we're going to the moon. It's just a simple fact. It's so easy now to show how pathetic America is in our space exploration capabilities, as well as how Apollo only went into the lower thermosphere, and that we struggle today to recapture Apollo because it only went into the lower thermosphere. 2 days ago, NASA created this "We Are Going" video to talk about how the new Dragon, or the SLS launching Orion, and all of these new systems are going to send us to the moon. That was 2 days ago. I want to point this little fact out. This happened yesterday when they launched.
And guys, a little bit of trouble at Kennedy Space Center today. A Starliner capsule built by Boeing went off course after a successful launch, apparently due to an engine problem. So our David Curley is in Cape Canaveral with the latest there. David, if you can just explain to us what exactly went wrong.
Well, Kimberly, this was the final test for the Starliner, a very important test to carry humans back to space from American soil. So launch was fine. The booster got it up to where it needed to be. Then the second stage, which is called a Centaur rocket, is supposed to get it into orbit. And the best example I can use is when you're making an off-ramp off of a freeway, you want to be at the right speed and the right angle to make that turn. Well, the problem with the Centaur rocket was it didn't fire because they were listening to, or the computer was actually looking at the wrong clock. So everything was automated and everything's supposed to happen at a certain time, but looking at the wrong clock, the Centaur did not fire. It did not get this vehicle into the right orbit, and that's the problem. So they had a decision to make. Can we actually use the fuel that's on board to get up to the higher orbit and make it to the space station, which was part of the mission, to dock with the International Space Station? They decided, no, we don't know if we have enough fuel. Let's protect this vehicle, the Starliner, and make sure we can get it back to Earth. So that's what they have done. It is in orbit. They are going to do some more tests, but come Sunday, it is going to return to Earth at this point and land at White Sands in New Mexico. This is an unusual capsule compared to what SpaceX is doing. It actually lands on Earth with some airbags. So that's an important part of the test. I will tell you, NASA and Boeing tried to spin this in the best positive way they could, that, we had a good launch and we hope to do a good landing, but they failed in getting to the space station. That doesn't mean that they can't actually carry astronauts to the space station on their next flight, but it is in question. And of course, it is Boeing versus SpaceX as to which company will be the first to carry astronauts back to the space station.
And David, I'm just curious, how long was NASA and Boeing preparing for this mission in general? Like, how long does it take before you actually do the launch?
Well, this has been going on for years. This program is called the crew missions, that basically SpaceX and Boeing were picked out of a number of companies that wanted to actually be the contractor that worked for NASA to take astronauts to the space station. They can actually put it together another launch in a relatively short period of time, but it could be months. And SpaceX, which has already flown to the space station, which with its Dragon crew capsule, has one more test to do as well. It's called a pad abort test. If they pass that, then they may get the okay to go ahead and go to the space station. This is a very expensive program for the taxpayers. Nearly $7 billion, Boeing $4.2 billion of that for what was supposed to be 2 test missions. This was the first one. They've got another test mission, and then 6 other missions that they're supposed to be going to the space station. But I got to tell you, they tried to make this sound as if a lot of things went right, and some things did go right, but this is a major fail for this program. And for Boeing, which has already been battered with the 737 MAX issue as well.
Absolutely. David Curley right there in Cape Canaveral with the details there. Thank you so much.
If you're unfamiliar with the Soyuz Apollo and now Soyuz Orion space race, the rundown is very simple. It goes like this. We rendezvoused, we caught up with them in '75. We were officially capable of hitting the correct orbital pattern in the lower thermosphere, like Russia had figured out. Apollo 17 and all the Apollo missions before that were to the lower thermosphere at about 230 miles up. Now, we couldn't figure out how to perfectly hit the right orbit like they have with the space stations. That's why Russia has put up all of the successful space stations, including the International Space Station. Now, we figured it out in 1975 with the Apollo-Soyuz mission, Apollo 18. You know, the Apollo mission after 17, the last crewed Apollo mission. Didn't go to the moon. It went 230 miles up. Where we are now, where every spacefaring nation has stopped because of ionizing radiation. Today, we're working on doing it again. Now, the shuttle mission, no matter what you want to think about it, the shuttle mission was a great piece of propaganda by the Russians. Now, they created two, and they said, this is what we're going to do next, after we rendezvoused with them. Because, well, if we can do that, then shit, we might actually create a space station like they were. But our Skylab fell, their Mir didn't. Their Mir stayed until they shot it down and created the International Space Station. And they tricked us into making shuttles. We made shuttles, they were faulty, they knew it wasn't going to work, they watched the system decay and knew that we would be relying on them. So eventually, now, we're relying on them, desperately trying to not pay $80 million a seat to take the Soyuz rocket up to the International Space Station that, yeah, we've contributed to, but they put it there, they own it, they've placed every craft there since they got there first. Call it what you will, that's a fact. So, being that, you know, space is hard, we're trying to achieve what we used to do with Apollo, but we're trying to do it with newer technology. And that's why everyone's just like, oh, well, it's new technology, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, but that's the problem. It's a big deal for us. Now, Russia, they've been using all of this, the emergency abort systems, everything that they're talking about, 15 plus years. In fact, a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, they used it in an emergency escape, and it was successful. So not only do we know that in tests it works for them, in actual practice it works for them. Their new Soyuz has a perfect record. So we're trying to figure out how we can catch up with that, not be leaders in the space race like they keep saying. We're not trying to lead anything. We're trying to catch up to the leaders we pay $80 million a seat for. Now, Starliner just got created by Boeing, and they want literally $90 to $95 million a capsule, or a seat per capsule. So, if it's a four-seater, you can do the math there, that's literally $10 to $15 million more than we're paying Russia to just shuttle us up now. So if it's all about science and space exploration, we'd be just contributing to Russia's space program since they've done it the best, and we'd use them. However, it's not about that. It's about military dominance, and that's what the space race is really about, is holding the high ground. And the high ground isn't the moon. The high ground is the thermosphere. If we create active shielding for our crafts, and we can create slight electromagnetic fields for the hulls, then it's going to be the mid-thermosphere. And that's where we'll fight all of our next battles. And we're going to be able to do that soon enough because of 5G, gamma, X-ray communications technologies that made it possible for our crafts to no longer, you know, our satellites are no longer in the upper or mid-thermosphere, they're in the exosphere now. And so now we can try to put us just above those and decommission all the satellites that are within the thermosphere. Plenty of room for us. So, well, the whole world is now invested in getting and filling up space with the room that we've just been, you know, given with the extra technologies that came out. The best that we can do is try to catch up, and we're failing at it. And bottom line, if you think that Artemis is going to the moon when they can't even achieve what the last Apollo mission was, and that's just a low Earth orbit, it's not because of technology. Soyuz has been doing it for 15 years. There's no excuses anymore. It's not you're lazy, or you're broke, or you just don't want it because you've been there. There's no more fucking excuses. Russia could. Russia would. Russia can't. Ionizing radiation is why. They've stopped where they can. They're better at calculus. Remember the movie Hidden Figures? We've made it very obvious that we're the dumb monkeys, and oh, we had to ask the black lady for help, and oh, well, we're trailing the rescues, but we'll get there too. We are not the best. We never were the best. We created a fucking fake movie to talk about how we're the best, and we've globbed onto it ever since then. It's created nationalism at a horrible level. And the only reason why we're stumbling right now is we refuse to accept where we left off so that we can all work together on getting back to where we left off. The shuttle missions were great, but that was a completely different type of thing. And it's not a functional system. Not for what we need to be doing. Not to create an international system that makes it possible for humans to go up and down safely and stay there so that we can start expanding further out. Artemis isn't going to create a space station around the moon. We can't even make one around us. If they're lucky, they'll get up there, and then Artemis will create our own space station with Space Force. Because bottom line, China, Russia, India, all of them, they bonded together. They've all got a space a program that can go into low Earth orbit successfully. China's launched people. India's got crafts that can launch people. Russia launches all the people. They've all worked together now. We went, no, fuck that. We're going to use Trump's Space Force and create our own wing, and we're going to create Artemis, and we're going to create our own space station. We're going alone. These are the consequences of that. I say, if you want to take sides, I'm going to take the sides of the better one. And Russia's better. They've always been better. I don't agree with anyone's politics. But the fact is, if it's a game we're playing, game on. I take the best side. Russia's winning. And bottom line, if this was a crewed mission, that crew, right now, it would be Apollo 13 all over again. So, you're losing, America. Your astronauts are technically floating out in space. This morning I woke up to this.
Boeing is trying to get back on track after a major blow to its space plans. The company's trying to get ahead of competitors in the race to launch American astronauts into space. But on Friday, Boeing botched the first critical test for the Starliner space capsule, and now the mission could face significant delays. Hillary Lane is here with more on what happened and what's next. Hillary, good morning.
Good morning. The new Starliner is currently in the wrong orbit after an error threw the capsule off its original course. Since the launch, NASA has canceled the spacecraft's original mission and is instead focusing on returning it to Earth in the best possible condition.
Lift off lead. Engine and full thrust.
A successful launch from Cape Canaveral.
We've cleared the tower.
The Atlas V rocket lit up the sky as it climbed into space. Attached to it, Boeing's Starliner astronaut capsule, an automated spacecraft headed to the International Space Station with supplies and holiday gifts.
Engine operating parameters continue to look good.
The Starliner was slated to begin carrying live astronauts next year, but problems following Friday's launch brought those plans to a sudden halt.
And the orbital insertion burn has been delayed.
A glitch in the Starliner's control system during the test caused it to burn significant amounts of fuel, preventing it from gaining enough altitude to rendezvous with the space station.
If we would have had crew in there, number one, they would have been safe. To be very clear, our crew would have been safe.
NASA and Boeing claim 1 minute into the flight. Starliner's launch was a milestone test for Boeing. The company is competing with Elon Musk's SpaceX to develop space taxis capable of carrying astronauts to the space station.
These are passionate people who are committing a big chunk of their lives to put Americans back in space from our soil.
NASA paid nearly $7 billion to both companies in 2014, but technical and financial setbacks have placed both more than 2 years behind schedule. In March, SpaceX carried out a successful unmanned flight of its Crew Dragon capsule to the space station. But in April, the company faced a major setback when that same capsule was destroyed during a ground test. The Starliner is expected to land in New Mexico on Sunday. Had the test been successful, it would have set the stage for Boeing to begin manned launch tests in 2020. Those plans could potentially be delayed several months.
The reason why this would be the same as the Apollo 13 mission, if there was men on board, is exactly the same problem they faced then. Is Apollo 13 didn't go around the moon. They ended up having ionization to the oxygen tanks occur, and well, what happens when a biradical gets a free radical electron introduced to it? It splits. And so obviously, as the oxygen in the tanks expanded because the ionization of the free radicals from the heavy particles from space coming through the hull, as only, active shielding will stop it. Passive shielding can only absorb it to a certain depth and can't absorb the amount that was up there. As we learned, obviously the mid-thermosphere is no place for us. Well, the oxygen tanks expanded, causing what's the easiest way out? The nozzle, and so it blew out the nozzle, and they drifted off course and floated upwards. That's why the secondary burn happened, why they needed to do that other launch and uncontrolled, burn. Everyone saw Tom Hanks do it in the movie Apollo 13, so, that's why that existed and happened, was they had to go back down. They were floating up and were gonna, fly away. That's why Fred Hayes and all them, that was ionization giving them the flu. They didn't have the flu. That's why 2 out of 3 of them died from the cancer that Marco Durante said they would get if they went into the mid-thermosphere without active shielding. So, when they finally, launched and came back down, there was a very, very slight window. Remember, the light on moon rocks? No, there's a very thin window to get back into Earth's magnetosphere or atmosphere, excuse me, without burning up, without completely disintegrating. Russia lost one of their women to this exact problem. She was scheduled to come back in and everything, you know, like the New Mexico desert landing is expected. However, she burnt up on the way in. They got the capsule. She was dead. The simple fact that just they could lose their crew the same way. So Jim Bridenstine and all of his nonsense, the crew would be totally fine. They're totally fine, lost in space. But no matter how much they fail, NASA will immediately come back with whatever they need to hold the propaganda true, because they started with that video and they're going to end with the video despite all of the setbacks, because Congress is going to give them money. They're the Defense Department. So none of this means anything. Their failures mean nothing. And what we're going to hear instead is this.
For sure, this is our moon countdown clock, where we are counting down the next 5 years to 2024, when we're planning to send humans to the moon as part of the Artemis program. So this clock is counting down the days, hours, minutes, and seconds to 2024, when the first woman and the next man will walk on the moon's south pole. So exactly, get excited for that. And if you want to learn more, you can go to nasa.gov/Artemis.
So as you can see, it's propaganda. Every time that they say that they're going to the moon, they're trying to figure out how to get back into low Earth orbit. They have a really hard time figuring out how to catch up to the current technology. Their spacefaring nations already have it, and they're not sharing the technology. They're lacking in every possible way, but it's military and defense, so we have to fund it, and we have to pretend that not only are we capable, but we're going to be the leaders. And it's as simple as, well, everything you just saw. They're struggling to get to where the last Apollo mission left off on, and they can't even admit it. They're going to just completely go back to this propaganda every time and talk about how we're the greatest, and, you know, it's because we did that moon landing. The moon landing didn't happen, so what are you? What are we? Maybe it's time to focus on the fucking problem. Stop pretending we already solved it.
Very close now.
20 seconds. 20 seconds to landing the first Starliner flight test vehicle. And Starliner touches down in the desert in New Mexico. An historic landing in White Sands, New Mexico concludes the first flight test of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. The first time an American-made, human-rated capsule has landed on land.
That took place right at 6:58 a.m. Central Time, 2 days, 1 hour, and 21 minutes into Starliner's mission. Congratulations, Starliner.
Congratulations, indeed.